Good afternoon, everybody. Many thanks for joining our webinar this afternoon, all about Office 365 groups. My name is Richard Barrett. I just want to do some quick introductions, run through the agenda of what we've got today. Got a lot of different speakers for you. We're very excited to have Christoph joining us from Microsoft. Christoph's going to be leading the majority of the first part of the session today. I'm also very pleased to say that we have a customer who's been using some of this technology also joining us. That's Richard from Dyson, who's going to give us later on in the webinar. He's going to take us through a customer story about how this is helping his business transform and move forwards. We are going to save time at the end of the webinar to answer any questions which you may have. So as we're going through the webinar, please feel free to drop questions into the system, and we'll look to save about 15 minutes for the end, and we'll cover as many of those as we can at the end of the session. So all it leaves me to do now is pass over to Christoph and get things moving. Christoph, over to you.
Oh, Richard, can you hear me?
Yeah, we've got you loud and clear. Loud and clear.
Okay, I apologize for that. So good afternoon, Europe. Good morning for those of you that might be in the U.S. Definitely a pleasure to have this webinar to talk about one of my favorite topics. Again, as Richard mentioned, I'll give a quick overview of groups. And I'm saying quick because I really want to spend time and also hear some of the questions, and more importantly, hear Richard tell his beginning of his journey with using Teams, which is built on top of groups. So I apologize in advance if groups is new to you. Might go a little fast, but rest assured there's plenty of content and assets that you can consume afterwards if you have follow-up questions. And as usual, you can also reach me if you do have additional questions with respect to groups. Hey Richard, can you help me transition slides? For some reason, I'm not getting the control on the slides. Please. Richard.
Apologies.
Okay.
There you go, Christoph. Sorry about that.
No worries. So just to quick word of introduction before I dive into the slides, but I'm Christoph Eisinger. I'm actually I'm a European based in Redmond. I've been here for 10 years, but I'm originally from France, and I'm a program manager at Microsoft. I had different roles at Microsoft, but lately I'm a program manager. Means I work on the engineering team and specifically on specifications and delivering new features and new value that delight you guys as customers of Office 365. So our team focuses on Office 365 groups, the foundation that I'll be talking about, as well as delivering an awesome experience, email collaboration experience, which is groups in Outlook. Okay, so enough talking about Christoph, let's talk about groups. The next first couple of slides, basically before we dive into the technical details, and I guess I'll give you a brief agenda while I'll talk. I'll give you an overview of why we built groups and what has changed in the world of collaboration in the commercial world, whether you're a large company, whether you're government, whether you're education, doesn't matter. But things have changed quite a bit for the past several years, how we get work done. And after that, I'll introduce where does group fits into our collaboration strategy. And then I'll dive deeper in terms of typically what are top of minds for IT professionals such as you, which is how do I govern, how do I administer groups, et cetera, and that will be a wrap. So starting with the first section of what is groups. Again, maybe I'm preaching to the choir. I know this applies, it's not region specific nor industry specific, but again, like I said, how we get work done has changed quite a bit over the years. There's more diversity in the workforce than ever before. There's different expectations in the workforce than ever before. Those of you that hiring uni graduates or doing interview loops with millennials these days, I'm sure you've seen they've got different expectations than maybe some of us that maybe started in the workforce 20 years ago. And that has that diversity in the workforce is definitely has created some challenges over the years for the company that didn't adapt to those new ways of getting work done. And that's what this slide shows is, you know, how we get work done as a team, and I'm stressing as a team, meaning more than one person. There's different ways to collaborate. You could argue right now we're on GoToWebinar, we're using live audio. That's collaboration. You know, with this, it's real time. It's more entertaining, more lively. But you know, we could be doing a blog post, we can be doing emails, and many other forms. But all those emergence of those ways on how to get work done has created challenges today for I'm sure every one of you, which is typically the biggest thing is what we call shadow IT, and the idea is, you know, back in the days when we didn't have smartphones or things like that, you know, I would go to my desk and fire up my computer and use the tools provided by IT to get work done whether I liked it or not. This day and age, since everyone has a smartphone or similar in their pockets, or at least have access to, it's very easy for an end user, for an employee at your organization to make a decision. If they don't like the tools provided that you've given them as IT to get their work done, they can quickly, for better or for worse, choose another app to get work done, whether that app's been sanctioned by IT, whether it abides by governance standards of your organizations or industry. It doesn't matter. You know, it only takes Christophe 2 seconds to create a WhatsApp group and invite his colleagues. Again, WhatsApp might not be the cup of tea or the sanctioned way to chat with a group, but it's just a reality. You know, Christophe can put this app, and I'm using WhatsApp as an example. It's a great app, but I'm sure you can relate to many other shadow IT solutions that are out there that your employees are using. So different needs, creating a bunch of challenges for your employees, and the next slide is, okay, what are we doing with Office 365 to cater to, you know, that diversity in the workforce, different expectations, different styles. And I know this is a busy slide, but basically the story is, you know, Office 365 is designed for the different work styles of every group. And what we mean by every group, you know, group is a pretty broad term, but, you know, whether you're collaborating with your direct reports, you know, it's a organizational based team, you're a manager and you get peers and you want to stay in touch of what everyone's doing on your team, whether it's project-based group, whether it's a 3-year project or a 1-week project, but, you know, you get a project manager and you got to ship something, or you get a set of deliverables. Or the third type, typically we refer to group, are community-based group, whether it's a community of practice or community of interest. Basically, you get one thing in common, the love of SharePoint or the love of specific practices in the industry, and you're sharing Q&A and you're tapping the collective knowledge of those experts at your company to get questions and unblock whatever you're working on. So those different type of groups, the different work styles are kind of like represented in the blue there on the slides, but probably the newest one that Richard will talk about it from the lens of a customer is Microsoft Teams. So obviously that's something we've just launched back in April. And, you know, it's this notion of rapid fire collaborations, what's also called as chat-based workspace. So I'll talk about that. Mail and calendar is another form of collaboration, group collaboration. Again, we've been in this business for decades now. It started on premises and now in the cloud, but think of back in the days distribution list or DLs, and now groups in Outlook. So basically, you know, email-based collaborations. The third one is, think of obviously Skype for business, you know, pretty much what we're doing here with a competitor's product, but, you know, it's, you know, you're having a call, you bring a colleague who's stuck on traffic or stuck at home or whatever, and you're working at whatever you need to work at during a meeting. The third one, co-creating content, is the idea that obviously as a team, as a group, you're going to be sharing things and producing things, and typically some of those format that you might be leveraging is, for instance, a Word document or presentations or spreadsheet, whatever you're working on. And the last one is something that a company we acquired 5 years ago that was that's called Yammer, which is all the notion of enterprise socials. So the idea there for that type of group collaboration is all about tapping the collective knowledge of the organizations. Very sweet spot typically is for a community of interest or community of practice. Now all those, and there's actually more different type of work styles, are all based on Office 365 groups. So think of groups as like the glue between all those apps, and it's all sitting in groups, and we'll definitely dive into what is groups in the next couple slides. So that's the common fabric for all those collaboration. And typically I also say, if you bought Office 365 and you want to collaborate, you will be using groups. All the workloads now are built on groups, whether it's Yammer, whether it's Teams, whether it's SharePoint, obviously Outlook and more. For instance, we've announced the replacement of Office Video, I think it's Microsoft Streams, that's also built on groups or communication sites or Staff Hub, all those apps that require more than one people are leveraging the Office 365 group fabric. So next slides, let's dive into a little bit more about what is groups. And again, at the high level, Office 365 Groups is a membership service. I've seen some people sometimes getting confused that think Groups is an app. Group is not an app. It's not something that as an end user you really touch. It's at the end of the day, when you create a group, it creates a Azure Active Directory object. And that's what this little diagram tries to illustrate, is the end users will go and say, oh, I need to, I'm a developer and I need that rapid fire collaboration, so maybe I'm going to start in Microsoft Teams and I'm going to spin up a new Teams to collaborate on a new app that we're building internally. Or maybe the users is going to use the ubiquity of email and he or she is going to, in Outlook, create a group. And that's what the first box in the diagram shows. So you create a group in whatever app, app you're using. And then what it does is it creates that single representation with a name, obviously with a set of members and a set of attributes in Azure Active Directory. And in case you didn't know, but Azure Active Directory is our identity service in the cloud for Office 365. So that's where you manage users and obviously not just users but groups. So it creates that representation of the group in AAD. And then in the background, typically we enhance the initial app that you started with additional services. So, if you created Teams, we're going to automatically provision a SharePoint team site so you can have one document repository for all the documents you'll be sharing in your group. We might add a planner so you can start using some of the planner goodness to maybe start tracking some of the tasks you need to do to ship a product or whatever you're working on in your project. So that's what groups is. And think of the three things at the bottom. Also a reminder. It gives you one identity for the group, and you'll see how that one single identity is of great value for you guys in IT to have one place to see the group and manage it. Obviously, there's federated resources. Like I say in the background, when you create a group, for whoever you create, we add a bunch of services, and that's what this means, and loose coupling as well. So, you can work in different apps, and we're still, well, there's loose coupling. You can also, again, like I say, manage groups centrally. So let me show you a little more details on now next how you can administer groups. And that's what the next couple slides does. And again, I apologize if some of you are very familiar with managing groups, and maybe this slides are more for the newbies. But like I say, one of the premises of group is that it's self-service, meaning end users are empowered to create those groups. It only takes seconds, and off they go and get work done. So, an end user that creates a group has the power to add members, to change the logo of the group, change the descriptions, and also they can delete the group. The idea when we designed that way back then was to really empower the users and also remove that friction from IT where they don't have to open a support ticket every time they need to do those actions around group membership or group lifecycle. Now, obviously, end users are empowered to do groups, to create groups and manage them, but you guys as admins, administrators, can also step in, and there's multiple endpoints where you can manage groups, whether it's in the portal, whether it's on the mobile app, or for those of you that script savvy, you can obviously use PowerShell. So again, really the main value is self-service, and I encourage all of you to enable that. But you can also step in and promote someone as an owner if someone leaves the company, or remove members, or whatever you need to do with the group. So that's the to manage the membership. The next thing is what can you do in terms of management of your directory? A question I get quite often is like, oh my goodness, it's self-service and people are just going to create millions of groups and it's going to pollute a directory. And here's some of the things we're doing to help alleviate that fear. So a couple things that we did. First of all, like I said earlier in the prior slide, a user is not only can create a group, but can delete a group. Up until a month ago, when a user deleted a group, it didn't matter if it was within Teams or SharePoint or Yammer or Outlook. When you delete a group, it would go not only delete the Azure Active Directory representation for that group, but it would then delete all the assets, all the services tied to that group. So all the content will be gone, all the documents stored in SharePoint, all the tasks that maybe you put in Planner, and all the emails and the calendar invites and all the OneNote, everything would be gone. So to alleviate that potential issue, if maybe you were too quick at delete a group and one of your colleagues wanted to save something, we've delivered the ability to restore delete group. And right now it's through PowerShell only. We're going to bring that also to the admin portal, so you can do that using the admin portal to restore it, but at least it gives you a safety net that within 30 days you can restore, you can fully restore groups and all the assets associated with it. Naming policy is something we have today. The only caveat is only applies to the Outlook endpoints that create a group. So it only applies, if you create a group from Outlook desktop or Outlook on the web or the mobile app. Later this month, we'll start rolling out naming policy in Azure Active Directory. And the beauty there when we start delivering that is, regardless of the endpoints that create a group, whether it's SharePoint, Teams, or and the list goes on, then it would apply whatever naming policy that your company, whatever is part of your governance. So whether it's a prefix, a suffix, or both, whatever it is. So that's going to help groom those groups. For instance, we get a customer, Mark and Spencer in the UK, and they prefix their group with I think GRP, those 3 letters, so they can clearly see in their Active Directory. If they do a on-premises sync back or write back, they can clearly see the groups, those objects that are born in the cloud in Azure Active Directory versus on-premises objects. Dynamic membership is something typically used where you get larger groups, maybe an entire org or an entire divisions. And basically, you can go in Active Directory, in Azure Active Directory, and define membership based on user attributes. So you can say, all the employees in the Reading office that are in marketing, I want them to be part of the Reading marketing group. So whatever attributes you get in Active Directory, you can create those queries. On near real times, the membership of the group will fluctuate up and down. So again, if you get 5 or 10 people on your team, you probably don't need that. But if you're a vice president or have hundreds or thousands of people reporting to you, or maybe for safety reason, you want to say everyone in building 1 in the London office or whatever it is, I want one way to reach out to those people in case there's a fire drill or whatever. So you don't want to put the onus on a poor administrative assistant to figure out who's in, who's out, who's the latest intern, who's transferred. And that's when dynamic membership comes really handy. So that's something that has been available for a while now, and definitely a great way for those specific use cases with large groups. Hidden membership gives you the ability to obfuscate who are the members of the group. Initially, that was a big ask from universities and schools in the US, but I think also in the UK for regulatory reasons, to avoid bullying and things like that. If Christoph is part of a special needs class, his peers shouldn't see that, so to avoid bullying. But you can see that also potentially maybe in the corporate world where you'd want to obfuscate who's part of a special task force. So that's something we support. And group permission permission is all about, like I told you, by design, by default, groups is self-service, so any users can create groups, and there might be good reasons why you don't want to free for all, and you want to put a little bit of law and order, and instead of letting Christoph create a group, only a limited set of folks maybe within IT can create groups on behalf of Christoph. So you can control that, and typically what companies that do that do instead, maybe they implement a form. So they say to the Christoph of the world, hey, go to this form to request a group, and maybe the form has a couple of things, tell me your manager's name and the reason why you want a group, and maybe a chargeback or whatever it is, and then Christoph clicks submits, and maybe it kicks out a PowerShell, or maybe someone in IT manually reviews it and manually creates a group. So that's around directory management. One thing we've delivered in, we rolled out in September of last year, which is, remember I was telling you there's a diversity in the workforce and how we collaborate. One of the diversity is this day and age, a lot of the workforce, I don't have the stats for the UK, but I know in the US, I think by 2020, it's almost going to be above 30% of the workforce will be independent, meaning they're not part of your Active Directory. They're self-employed experts that come in and help you for a project based on their expertise. And the challenge with that is because Christoph is not part of Contoso, that's not part of your Active Directory, but is still an integral part of a group, whatever is contributing to, how do you bring that Christoph in and give him all the assets so he can collaborate? And that's what we did with external guests. So you can add any user account, and the example on the slide is, for instance, a Gmail. So it's not even a Microsoft account. It's not even an Office 365 account. And when you add that person to the group, she or he then is added to Azure Active Directory, and we create a representation for that users. And then on the back end afterward, they get access to all the conversations, for instance, all the emails, and they get access to all the documents in SharePoint, the OneNote, and stuff like that. So they can really hit the ground running and start contributing to the project du jour that they've been looped in. So that's guest access. Typically the questions I get is, hey, when are we going to support guest access in Teams and Planner? And those are hot items on the roadmap, and the team teams is working on that very hard, as well as the Planner teams. So right now this is only supported for the email portion of groups as well as SharePoint. But yeah, we will deliver guest access for Teams and for Planner in the coming month. So I also put 2 links. Typically I get a lot of questions with that, and those links on that slide has a lot more detail on how does it work from an end users and how can I manage it from an IT perspective. So that's guest access to bring people outside of the firewall to help work on a project. What else have we delivered? Group policy and information protection. So the idea is, I've talked a little bit about how you can groom your Active Directory. Another topic is, how do I govern it to whatever compliance, whatever regulatory thing I need to abide to, depending on the vertical you operate. And we've done a ton of things for the past year and a half. Things like data classification, usage guideline, the data classification, you can define that, and it enables you to put whatever classification your company abides to or is a standard for each group. So for instance, at Microsoft, we have a 3-tier classification: low, medium, high. High meaning it contains customer information, sensitive data. So for instance, when it's high, a group needs to be private, typically no external sharing, and a bunch of other policies. Versus low, typically maybe a community of interest, it's for everyone at Microsoft to see and consume and lurk and whatever. And so you can do that, and you can definitely encourage that as a best practice to implement those things. So you do put, not all groups are created equal, and so you can then start matching and setting expectation with the users that, hey, Christoph, you created the project Halo. It's a classification high, meaning remember very specific guidelines on working on a project that's classified as high. And that's also what the user's guideline does. We're all humans, and it's just a great it's a guardrail to remind the users of what he or she is supposed to do and not do. And I'm sure you all have HR policies around harassments and protecting your informations and stuff like that. And that's what the usage guideline is. You know, typically customers, you define the URL of the usage guidelines, and it points to your standard human resources policies on what can Christoph do and what Christoph cannot do at your favorite company. Preservation policy and label management are also things that came out in April, and the idea is for specific groups, maybe you're filing in patent, or maybe you're in legal litigations, and the lawyers or at your company needs to put things on hold, and that's what this does. You can retain information to specific groups indefinitely or for a specific number of days. And then, you know, typically when you do the retention, then you can put e-discovery and do all those things tied to retention policies. The other thing also that this feature enables, which is the opposite, which I've seen in certain industries, which is the opposite of retaining, which is deleting. So you only want to retain a certain number of days of information. So for instance, you can set, I don't know, 90 days retention policy. That means any assets, whether it's a document or an email, that's older than that gets automatically deleted. So that's preservation policy. Label management is another spin to it. So you can start either manually labeling an email or a document tied to a group, or you can use some of the advanced features like auto labeling. And typically think of labeling kind of a tagging mechanism, and when you tag an email or label an email, then in the back end, potentially you can associate specific policies with an email that's tagged ABC, for instance. So I know this might send some advanced topics. There's a ton of documentations, and actually the links that are in those slides have the link to the detailed documentations on how can you leverage that to abide to whatever requirements or policies you get at your respective companies. But the point is, like, okay, you know, from the most basic to the most advanced policies are available today to make sure that the groups can be used for the most sensitive and to abide by your legal standards. So the next question I get is, hey, how do IT stay in control and see how people are using groups? And that's what kind of that slide talks about. Obviously, we do audit the circadian activities tied to a group. When, you know, like Christoph created a group, Christoph deleted a group, Christoph added Richard to the group, and so forth. So you can look at the audit and say, well, you know, why is Christoph creating 5 marketing groups, or what did Christoph do before he got fired, and stuff like that. So you have all that information in the audit log, and you can search those audit log either to the Azure portal or the Office 365 portal. Maybe some of you don't have access to the security and compliance, but there's definitely something that I recommend being familiar with because it might come in handy when you do have some issues with a group and you need to find out, you know, work back what happened. The group's activity report was auditing is just to see what people are doing with the group. The activity report is meant to start giving you usage information. You know, what are the groups that are most active? What are groups that are consuming the most amount of storage, and so forth? And the idea is, or what are groups that are doing nothing? And the idea is, again, for you guys in IT, maybe the most active group, maybe you want to reach out to those users, whether they're in R&D or sales or whatever, and say, hey, tell us what's working so well from you, because maybe we need to do a case study internally and use what's working for you, and maybe tell another team or another division that this is a great use case to leverage groups. So that's the journey. And maybe the ones that aren't used anymore, maybe you can go in and say, hey, Christoph, maybe we should delete that group. SharePoint site usage report, you know, it's a question I get quite often, is how do I track, you know, all the assets that are produced by groups, and SharePoint has a great set of reports where you can track usage and mainly storage consumptions of all those team sites, or each team site that's associated with groups. And then like everything else on administrative, if you want to create your own custom reports and data mart and whatever, we get you covered with PowerShell and REST API to pipe that data and to whatever your data store and do whatever you want with it. So that's reporting, getting insights in terms of groups. Um, almost done. The last thing, this slide is, I've touched on some of those things, but obviously we're not standing still and we continue to invest heavily as group is prominent and a key part of collaboration in 365 and based on your feedback, we keep investing in improving the governance. And those are some of the items that, I did a blog post in April that we announced that are coming. So expiring groups, again, this is going to be coming in the next couple of weeks. The idea is you set an expiry date or time frame, maybe 3 months or 6 months. A little before that date arrives, maybe 30 days or 60 days, you can configure all those things. The owner of the group, or owners plural, will get an email reminder to say, Christoph, your group's is up for renewal. Do you want are you still using that group? Or if you do, then reattests it that you continue to collaborate at a group, or you just ignore it, say no, and then after a period of time when the deadline arrives, then the group gets automatically deleted. So it's just a mechanism to, again, groom the Active Directory and maybe remove some of those unused groups. So that's expiry of groups. Azure naming policy, I've already talked about that. Regardless of the endpoints where you create groups, it will apply a naming policy. And maybe, you don't really need a prefix suffix policy, but the other thing that this feature is going to deliver is, first of all, it's going to block profanity or ban words, which is maybe not a big need in the enterprise, but we know for universities or education, I don't know if you have any of you are on the line, but obviously students can be very creative, and there's definitely words that you don't want be used for naming a group. And then the third thing that this is going to deliver as well is what we call block names. So for instance, sales at Contoso or help desk or Satya Nadella at Microsoft, which is our CEO. You don't want people to pretend to be our CEO and maybe start getting private email from employees that are happy or unhappy. And you don't want Christoph to create a group called sales at Microsoft, because sales is just a common word. Then instead, maybe you already have a group for that and you want to reserve that. So if people have questions about, I don't know, sales, they can email that. So that's the third thing that this feature is also going to give you, ability to block some alias so that users don't, by mistakes or intentionally, use those alias. Default classifications, it's just an improvement on what we've already delivered, which is the ability to define a default. Today, as I say, you can define a classification, but unfortunately in the V1 we didn't give you a default. Now with default, wherever the group is created from, it will always have a default, whatever your classification is. And there's more improvements on classifications. That's the third bullet. The call to action on this slide is, there's obviously more stuff to come out. I'll give you pointers on how to keep track on the roadmap. This slide is one thing we've been pushing hard, and I want to be loud and clear is, what do you do with today? A common form of collaborations is still very popular, is using distribution lists or distribution groups. And again, this is passé, and we think the future for collaborations, at least for the people that want to collaborate over email, is groups in Outlook. So we've delivered a number of tools to help convert those distribution lists to groups in Outlook, and that's what this slide gives you all the pointers you can do. You can upgrade one by one, or you can do a bulk upgrade. And we've also give you talking point, which is why is the groups in Outlook better than a new distribution list? Was it better for end users? And more importantly, was it better for IT? Which is some of the reasons I already mentioned. So definitely, I want you guys, as a call to actions, definitely upgrade those DLs, and definitely, we think the best offering you can give users for email-based collaboration is groups in Outlook. Okay, sorry, just switching slides. So 2 more slides on pointers on how to get started, which are the questions I get quite often is, hey, which tool I should use when on different use cases, and help me get started. And our answers at Microsoft globally for Office 365 is to leverage Fast Track. To be clear, Fast Track is free, and you get access to a ton of content to help you on the journey, to help you educate users, help train users. We get videos and articles and blah, 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 and more. So, and we get stuff about groups. So definitely consume that if you're not familiar, and there's a ton of content coming, especially on use cases and things like that, which we get a lot of questions about. You know, when should I use Teams? When should I use Outlook? And et cetera, et cetera. And then last but not least, where do I get additional information on roadmap? And this is a summary slides. Hopefully you're familiar with our roadmap slide on Fast Track. And this has all the items that's coming or in the pipeline for all up Office 365, and you can sort by different apps, by different services. But this should be your go-to place if you do have questions, if you want to check the status. Now, if you do have questions, we have plenty of news groups on our technical community, and depending whether it's Teams-related questions or SharePoint or just general groups, you know, it's a beauty because those news groups are typically monitored by MVPs or experts, and obviously us and Microsoft and additional customers. So it's a great community-based news groups. It's a great way to get questions to whatever is your top of mind. The other thing I mentioned about this slide is obviously we keep investing in each of the individual apps, making each awesome. You know, we keep investing in Outlook, and obviously Teams, we're doing a ton of investment. It's a new kid on the block, and all the other apps. And in parallel, we also invest on the government subgroups. And then we're also investing on helping you go from one app to another, and we're helping you obviously administer things across workloads. So different accesses on investments that we continue to do around groups and collaboration in Office 365. Okay, I went pretty fast. Time for me to be quiet and pass the baton to Richard, and then we'll be doing Q&A afterward.
Thanks for that, Christophe. That was fantastic. It was a really great overview there. I've seen there's some questions that have come in already, which is great. As Christophe said, we will take some questions at the end. But what we wanted to do first was I just wanted to introduce. We've actually got a customer on the line who's been using Microsoft Teams. So I'd like to introduce Richard. Richard, maybe to start off with, it'd be great if you could just introduce yourself and what your role is, please.
Yeah, no problem at all. So hi everyone, yeah, my name's Richard Vine. I've got a bit of a long title. I'm an information collaboration application lead for Dyson. So this is Dyson, the vacuum cleaner company, but we really call ourselves a technology company. So if you look at a lot of our products, we're very much now into technology, very much into the connected products and realm. So yeah, I work in the IT design area for Dyson. I deal with information collaboration software requests, so anything that comes into the business, and I look at the current technology that we've got, and if we don't have anything that matches that, then I look at the new technology. I've been working on projects at the moment like what we would call modern Office. So this is something that includes Office 365, but would also include Windows 10, infrastructure, meeting rooms, Surface hubs, unified comms, and would also lead us into our new intranet project, which actually would be more like a digital workspace.
Cool, fantastic, Richard. Sounds like you're a busy person, so thanks for taking the time to join us this afternoon.
Right.
So Richard, I think one of the things we wanted to talk about was an Office 365 Teams POC that you've been running for quite some time now. But maybe before we jump into the Teams POC and discuss why you looked at that sort of rapid fire collaboration system, as Christophe put it, it'd be interesting to sort of know why did you look at things like groups and teams to begin with? What do you feel that business needs were not being met by your current systems?
Okay, so I'll give you a little bit of background as well into where we started. So we did a survey in 2015. This was a survey to then I think it was about 6,500 people in Dyson. We've just done another one now, which is more like 8,500. And collaboration didn't come out particularly well across the business. So this was something that we really wanted to look into. We're also getting a lot of pressure from the business in using things like Slack and WhatsApp and external communication, external collaboration tools. And we were kind of a bit fed up really with using our email, and it was very interesting how if you were communicating with any of your family, you would use a lot of these types of tools like WhatsApp and Messenger and Snapchat and all this. But as soon as you come into a business, you instantly use email. We've also got a very diverse workforce. So our average age is 27 years old in Dyson. So we've got quite a young workforce. So some of the use cases we're looking at is we've got this modern office, this big push in terms of trying to get us a lot more agile and trying to increase the amount of work we can kind of produce. Christoph said earlier about shadow IT, big problem for everyone, something that I've been banging on about for a long, long time, that we need to open our eyes to this. The reason that we get a lot of shadow IT is we employ 3,500 RDD engineers who are told to think out the box. You cannot box these people in. If they can't do a job, they'll go off and find something. So we also wanted access to our information easily and not get restricted by our VPN. Our VPN is can be a bit of a blocker sometimes. We also wanted, you know, sort of one file in one place and one version. We want to make it easy to find stuff. So, you know, we find that we've got a lot of stuff everywhere. When we actually started with this, it was always about anywhere, anytime, any Dyson device. So this was, so we're very much in terms of Dell, MacBook, iPad, iPhone. We also wanted to, as part of the team stuff, try and create some togetherness. We've got a big team, but we have an agile working environment. So we have desks, but all of the IT design team don't necessarily always sit with each other. And we have a Spanish contingent as well. So these guys are coming in every 2 weeks. So we wanted to make sure that we could bring some togetherness. And we also want to get more out of our Surface Hubs. We've got about 10 Surface Hubs in the business and we're growing. We don't use Office 365 on that, so we really want to use that. Other stuff that we wanted to do was move away from tin. So instead of managing all the tin on premise, we want to be able to, you know, start servicing, you know, start managing all the services and actually manage our customers. We're a bit concerned as well with the GDPR that's coming up next year. So we want to try and minimize our software estate so that we can kind of look after that. Easy external collaboration is massive for us. So we do a lot of collaboration with people externally, but we want to do that in a secure fashion. And we also want to offer the business a better set of tools. And this kind of comes back to the shadow IT stuff, which is people don't actively go off and choose Dropbox or choose Box or choose Google Drive because they absolutely want to. They do that because you're unable to offer them the tools that they need. So this is a big thing for us is Office 365 offers a wealth of tools. You know, they're always bringing out new software. To Do was a new one that came out, I think, about 3 weeks ago. The new Visio stuff is coming as well. You know, there's loads and loads of stuff coming that's really beneficial for us. So we really want to sort of partner with Microsoft in terms of making sure that we can use those tools, but actually that all of our staff can actually access those tools. So SharePoint's a good example where we're not very good at deploying SharePoint on premise, but with Teams, which I'll talk and I'll come on to, because that's based on SharePoint, instead of waiting 2 weeks for a SharePoint site, you can create one in 20 seconds. It's that quick. So you know, there's a lot of reasons why we're going in the direction that we're going in.
Awesome. Okay, so let's move on to your team's proof of concept then. So, you know, when did you kick off this proof of concept? You know, who have you got involved? But probably most importantly, you know, what is it you were trying to prove? You know, something I see with working with, you know, with lots of customers is, you know, it's very easy to kick off a proof of concept, but it's quite important to know what you're trying to achieve. And yeah, it'd be great to know what you were trying to achieve, when it started, and who's involved with it.
Okay, well, if I'm fair, we first started in November. When it first came out, I was on it straight away. Downloaded it, installed it, got on it, and for about the first 2 days, I was the only person in Dyson on it. And really for that, it was to understand what is it? What does it do? You know, how is this not Yammer? How is this not just another ESN type sort of tool? And after a couple of days, I really got it, and then I downloaded the iPad app, and I started talking to myself from an iPad app to a laptop. But then I got a little bit lonely, so you know, you really need a few friends on there to kind of pass the time. So so I then started to present it to some of our team, and then I really started to kind of try to drive an initiative. So what we did was we ran a 30-day POC. This was all around Mac, PC, mobile devices. And the whole point of it was about bringing all of our files together. So it was about working in one place. We had files in email, file shares, SharePoint, just local drives everywhere. And the SharePoint site that we had was good. It had a lot of information in it, but it just wasn't how we wanted it. And there was no chat-based collaboration around that. Our Skype for Business that we've got on premise is still being rolled out, so it wasn't necessarily that everyone had that as well. So this was just a fantastic tool for us to bring everything together into one place, and we found that it worked really, really well for us.
Cool. So that probably leads me on then to sort of see how it's gone. I mean, if you kicked off in November when sort of the public preview of Teams came out, you've obviously been using it for a little while now. Yeah, how's it gone? How would you say that it's been received?
Yeah, so from November we waited and we mucked around with it in sort of about a group of sort of 15, but then as soon as it became GA, that's when we started rolling it out more. So now we've got IT design, we've got some project managers in there, and it's gone really, really well. I think what was interesting was how we started was very much, let me teach you about Teams, go and create Teams, enjoy it, embrace it, you know, really give them the freedom to be able to do that. And that worked really, really well, but then we had lots and lots and lots of teams. So a lot of the feedback we were getting was, I can't find anything, or I don't know what team I'm supposed to be in, or where is everything? So we really looked at the amount of teams that we've got, and we looked at what we were doing, and we were kind of falling back into our old ways of working. So if you looked at the teams, they're like folders. People were just creating another folder for more information. And they weren't getting that if we created teams and new channels, then actually we can get more out of it. I also changed all the way we did the training, which was very much about taking them through the whole product very lightly, to focusing a lot more on the basics. So just simple stuff like when you want to create a new conversation, showing them that where you reply is in the reply box in that thread, not in the conversation box at the bottom, because you're creating a whole new conversation. So I think it was really interesting that, you know, teaching the basics was really, really good, but also showing them T-Bot that's in there, because if you go into T-Bot, in T-Bot you've got videos in there. The longest video is 2 minutes 9 seconds. That's the introduction. The rest of them are 1.5 minutes. So within 15 minutes you can be up and running and understanding everything about Teams. So for me, that's exactly what it's about. You know, we want tools where you need minimal amount of training. You know, we're getting 30 people in every single Monday. We cannot have people stuck in training rooms day in, day out for just years. They won't do it. So we need tools that really people will get straight away. And I found that people did. And once you told them a little story and you told them how you wanted to use it, it worked really well.
Cool. So let's then go for sort of a second question with a couple of points. What do you reckon the best thing you've experienced as part of the proof of concept is, and equally, you know, what would you say is the sort of biggest learning, or, you know, biggest item you had to overcome during the proof of concept? Let's start with the positive. Let's get the best one first.
Well, I'll start with, be ready to take some flack. Okay, I'm really quite passionate about this tool. I really, really like it. I think it's really beneficial. So I take a lot of flack, and I hear a lot of, oh, I'll stick that in Teams then, shall I, Rich? And I'm like, yeah, stick in Teams, absolutely. So, you know, and don't assume actually that everyone understands this kind of technology. It was quite interesting. There's a lot of people in IT that don't have Facebook and don't have WhatsApp and don't have Snapchat. You can't just go and assume that people are going to instantly get this. The people that use that type of technology very, very, very quickly get it. Other people don't. They don't understand, well, what's wrong with just sending an email? I get the same result. Absolutely you do, but you just have to explain to them about how they can benefit more by not doing that and having that in a team environment. I think you also need to be very quick to change the way you deliver Teams. As I say, the way we did it was quite sort of go away and just learn it and do it and embrace it and getting them on there. And that was great for our POC because it wasn't going out to a lot of people and we could really manage that, and then we brought it back in. I think I would probably do that again the same way because it just gave people a bit of freedom. But now that we've kind of brought it in and we've got 3 teams, so the way that we now do it is we have an IT design team that is all about what our team is. We have things for catch-ups each week. We've got a fun and frolics sort of channel where people stick loads of giffies and fun, and if they want to have a moan, they go in there and stuff like that. We've then got an IT projects channel where every single channel is IT projects, and that's a big shift. So this is, instead of creating a new team, stick it as a channel, because actually a lot of the stuff I do in terms of this Office 365 and Teams and other social stuff actually isn't private. You know, what is private sometimes is our projects, so what we would call end projects. Anything like that, we've said create a separate team and put people in it. But the reason that we want to minimize the amount of teams is so that actually when they need to share, they can instantly, and they don't have this problem of nobody's in a group. So yeah, don't go and create lots and lots of teams and get people to use channels. Also, I think you've got to be passionate about this. You've got to want people to use it. They've got to see that you can see the benefit of it. You know, really drive that in people. It's hard to get buy-in, but I think if you do, it's really, really beneficial. I think that, you know, it's a fantastic way also of showing how good SharePoint is in this new world. Because, as I say, in our organisation, SharePoint's got a tiny bit of a bad name. And I think it's a really good way of reinvigorating SharePoint for our organisation and getting it right. But I also think that Teams is just going to get better and better. So, you know, the more that you use it, the more you'll like it, but actually the more new features come along. The amount of times I've sat down to actually do a training session and a new box has appeared. So I don't know if anyone's looked this week, we've now got add cloud storage. That's just turned up. So, you know, this is great stuff, but you have to be prepared to be able to see all of these new features, and sometimes your staff will find them before you.
Yeah, that's probably a good one. My next question was going to be any advice for others, but I think that last one there.
No, there's one. Yeah.
So obviously, if we talk about your proof of concept, obviously, you know, you work for a much larger organisation, as you said, than where the proof of concept is. You know, what are your plans to roll this out? Is this something you're doing, you know, straight away? How's it going to go? It'd be good to understand a little bit about how you see rolling this out to a very large organisation.
Yeah, so this is part of our bigger modern office plan. So so what we're actually working on at the moment is our foundations. So we want to roll this out globally. We don't want to do this in terms of UK, then US, then Japan, and then SEA, and so on and so forth. We want to do this quite global. So what we're actually working on at the moment is a foundation plan. So we'll be working with Microsoft and third parties to look at how we can get all of our network readiness. So what I don't want is the experience for the user to be worse than what it currently is. So this is all cloud-based. None of this is on-premise. So, you know, you have your app that is on your desktop or on your iPad, which is great, but this is all cloud-based. So you must make sure that the infrastructure is in place, that you've checked all of that. If you're sticking 8,500 people to the cloud through your pipe and you haven't checked it, you could really have a problem. So, you know, there's also video and stuff within this platform. You can do everything from it. So people potentially could spend a lot of time in Teams. So you need to be ready for that. And I think that's something that we're going to be doing a lot of.
Yeah, sounds prudent. Sounds prudent. So one final question before we jump to the main Q&A. You know, obviously we've spoken a lot about Teams. You know, what other areas for Office 365, you know, you considering? Should be good to sort of get some views on that.
Yeah, so we'll be looking at a very much a phased approach. So even though we think there's a lot of benefit to many tools in Office 365, if we come out with all of them at once, it will just drown the organisation, and they just can't cope with that. So what we'll be looking at the big ones, the obvious ones. So Exchange Online, OneDrive for Business, and actually Delve as well. We feel that now we understand Delve a bit more and understand the capabilities and the fact that it's searching across the whole of Office 365. And what you can get out of that, we really like it. We've pushed things like SharePoint into what we would call phase 2, because we really want to concentrate more on SharePoint and really get the best out of it. So we really want to drive how we can do document management really well with workflow and all sorts, and self-service, proper self-service in SharePoint. So yeah, so the first ones we'll be looking at will be Exchange, OneDrive, Scope for Business on-premise, and Delve. And in phase 2, we'll be looking at things like SharePoint, Planner, Stream, Power Apps, Flow, and Power BI. So we touch a little bit on Power BI at the moment, but not a lot. I tend to use as many of the apps as possible to learn about them, but we do need to stagger it.
Perfect. Well, Richard, just from my point of view, thank you so much for joining us to sort of give some viewpoints down on how it's going for you, and hopefully some advice to other people who are embarking on something like this. I think it's something that always sort of goes down well. So really appreciate you joining us there today. Just sort of taking it forward, we've got a couple of sort of minutes left, and really we wanted to give people an opportunity to sort of ask questions that either I can answer from an output point of view, or probably more likely Christoph can answer, or maybe even Richard can answer as well if there's questions about his proof of concept.
Happy to answer if you've got any questions.
So I know that Christoph has actually answered many of the questions within this sort of questions within the chat window. So hopefully you've all seen the questions. But Christoph, I don't know if you want to sort of kind of summarize any of the questions or any themes that you're seeing in the questions there.
Sure. I think there's a theme on classifications and SharePoint, and so I've answered a lot of those questions. And again, we get a lot of content available. Again, for classification, remember it's an extensible policy, so you put in whatever you want, whether it's a 5-tier classification, 3-tier, whatever. So that's one recurring questions. Then there's the recurring questions around SharePoint. Let me be very clear. Every time you create a group, regardless of where you are, it will create a full site collections with a single team site in it. And it's giving you the what we call the modern team site, you know, the latest and greatest about SharePoint. So a person was asking how does that impact governance, you know, and I don't know what the governance is, but this is a great question because all the features that I was mentioning about classifications or retention applies obviously to that SharePoint team site. So it's definitely something you need to look at and consider it because, you know, as Richard was saying, you know, starting with Teams, but when he was saying, hey, SharePoint is phase 2, well, actually, hopefully you realize that SharePoint is phase 1 if you're using Teams because every team will create a team site. So you definitely need to put that into considerations and look at your governance and compliance around all those assets that are going to be stored in SharePoint and make sure you rendezvous that with your existing plan to roll out SharePoint. The other thing I wanted to mention that I forgot to mention, I mentioned a lot of the administration things that we have out of the box and improvements that's coming around governance. I also want to stress, like obviously that's the reason I'm also on the call, and I want to thank AvePoint for inviting me, but there's also third-party solutions such as AvePoint that help you take it further depending on your exact needs or your exact knowledge of 365. I think a person on the chat was asking, hey, do you need an administrator to manage this? And hopefully you do have an administrator to manage Office 365, you know, and someone that can step in and put some law and order or recover whatever an issue is. I'll pause. Let me see if there's any other questions.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure if there's maybe one more question come in. While Christoph checks that, I'm just going to sort of move on to the last slide, and if there is another question, we'll ask Christoph if he's got time to answer it. So one thing I wanted just to point out is, you know, there's a ton of information out there on Office 365 groups. Christoph has you know, provided lots of links today. We've also sort of grouped a lot of it together at AvePoint. So if you go to avepoint.com/office-365-groups, we've got links to sort of loads of different places. We've got other webinars that Christoph himself has been involved in the past as well. So as well as the links Christoph shared, you know, feel free to grab some of that information from there. I think we've got about 2 minutes. Christoph, was there any more questions, or are we done?
No, there's a couple questions on reporting and things like that. So rest assured, like, you know, someone was asking, hey, can you create a report based on classifications? And I was actually typing, but I'll reply verbally. But you can do that today using our API, and so something that we're also gonna improve. The key thing I want to stress around reporting and insights, it's definitely one of those things where it's a journey and we have stuff today and we're obviously not standing still, and we're going to continue to improve things. You know, for instance, today actually we just made a big announcement, which is the availability of Microsoft Workspace Analytics. So, you know, it's definitely something we're not standing still, and keep all the good feedback, whether it's reporting group by classifications or whatever it is, type of slicing and dicing that you need. But keep telling us the feedback. You know, we get channels for that with user voice or the tech community, but keep us honest on what would delight you guys and then block you and make you leverage the Office 365 stack.
Perfect, perfect. So I think all it leaves for me to say is a massive thank you to both Christoph and to Richard for joining us today. We will, via sort of combined knowledge in this series, we'll make sure that we send a copy of this recording out to everyone, also a copy of the slides. The other thing I encourage you to do as well is have a look at the rest of the webinars in this What's New series, as there's plenty more great content coming up over the coming weeks. And with that, that's probably all for me. Thank you very much for joining, Christoph. Richard, if you want to say any closing points, that'd be great.
No, thank you all. And one thing I want to mention that I didn't stress, but I see a question that just came in. It says, hey, how do you choose between Teams and Outlook? And I think, you know, Richard really used great words to explain it. We do think it's some of the options are available, and you can argue maybe there's some overlap, but it's a decision you need to make, you as a customers, and you know, change management is hard. You know, not everyone's blessed with a younger generation in the workforce, and some people might be used to their email, and maybe changing those habits might be very hard. So the least you can do is maybe graduate them from distribution list to groups in Outlook. And maybe for the younger folks or folks that have specific needs around rapid fire collaboration, then Teams might be a great starting point. So again, we don't think one size fits all, and you also have to adapt to the workforce and the specific needs that they might have.
Cool.
So thanks again for your listening to this.
Yeah, I think the only other thing I'd add is the biggest success I've had with this is when we started doing sort of personas and examples. So we pulled 3 examples out in terms of working on an Excel budget sheet within Teams, working on PowerPoint presentations and working on projects, and really just some really simple PowerPoint slides in terms of the old of where they are now and the new of where they can go. And that seemed to resonate really well with people. It was really simple, it was really graphical. So we're going to keep building those, and I think we'll keep building persona stuff for as we start to roll out more in Office 365. The other thing I found really helpful for me is the success with Teams.com site that Microsoft have got. There's tons of content on there, so I used that as well, which is really useful.
Cool. Thanks, Richard. Cool. So fantastic, everyone. Thank you very much for joining today. We're really pleased you could take the time to spend it with us, and we'll see you again soon. We'll make sure we get this recording over to you as soon as possible. Many thanks.
Cheers.
Thanks.